Are you struggling to free up time for client advisory work? Is scope creep hurting your fixed pricing model? Are your quality control processes lacking? Is your staff stuck in a never-ending monthly close process? Ever wish you had a genie that could help you out? Stay tuned to hear more from our sponsor, SmartBooks Genie, later in the episode.
Billions of dollars are going to people who don't necessarily need it, and a lot of people who really, really need the money are left out in the cold. And now we're being asked to spend another $250 billion to do what? And so I looked at the numbers. What will another $250 billion that you and I are going to have to pay back someday, David? What is that going to get us?
This episode of the Cloud Accounting Podcast is sponsored by Accounting Suite. Accounting Suite is cloud accounting software that acts like a customizable ERP system. It lets you start out with just the features you need today, and in the future, as your business grows, you can easily add Accounting Suite extensions to give you the features you need. A major strength of Accounting Suite is its robust set of inventory management tools to track inventory levels, orders, sales, and deliveries from anywhere at any time. Accounting Suite has an extension for multi-channel online sales. After connecting your online marketplaces, Accounting Suite will download all your transactions for you to approve prior to entry into the accounting system. It's similar to working with bank feeds. Accounting Suite is offering Cloud Accounting Podcast listeners 50% off forever by using the promo code CAP_50_2020. To take advantage of this exciting offer and to learn more about how Accounting Suite offers an upgradable path for your firm and company's future, head over to cloudaccountingpodcast.promo/asuite. That is cloudaccountingpodcast.promo/ASUITE. This episode of the Cloud Accounting Podcast is sponsored by BQE Core. As firms everywhere are positioning themselves to work remotely, BQE Software is committed to supporting you and your employees during this critical time. BQE's core products operate 100% on a native cloud platform that's uniquely able to help you in your efforts to embrace remote work while maintaining your productivity. In response to the impact that COVID-19 has had on your firm and your clients' businesses, the team at BQE has let us know that Cloud Accounting Podcast listeners will now receive 3 months of BQE Core for free with an annual subscription package purchased on or before May 31st, 2020. To learn more, head over to cloudaccountingpodcast.promo/core. That is cloudaccountingpodcast.promo/CORE.
Welcome to the Cloud Accounting Podcast. I'm Blake Oliver.
And I'm David Leary. Blake, 2 weeks ago, we sat down hours after they opened up the PPP, and now we're here 2 weeks later, and it's done. $349 billion is just gone. It's done.
Exactly 2 weeks, right? Because it was April 3rd that it opened up.
Yes.
And It is April 17th in the afternoon, and the funds ran out yesterday morning, was it?
As the day, yeah, it depends on how you counted because they had to back out the fees that the banks would take. Mm-hmm. So the final numbers I can read, that's from an SBA slide deck that came out this morning. The reported loans that got E-Trans numbers, these are not people that applied for loans. So these are just people that the bank took the data, submitted to the SBA, and an E-Trans number, tracking number was issued. So that's 1,662,367 for a total loan amount of $342 billion.
Wow.
And if you back out the $10 billion in fees that Marco Rubio reported on, it actually puts it to a negative 1%. 101% has now been allocated.
So now Republicans are calling for another $250 billion to be added to the program. And Democrats have some sort of conditions they want before the 250 gets released. So there's all this political bickering going on. But maybe I think there's a little more nuance here to this discussion than just let's add more money, or before we add more money, we want to get more money for hospitals, or, like that. Like, let's actually talk about who this program has helped so far, what it has achieved. And, maybe then we can debate whether or not it's worth it adding more money. Does that sound like a good idea?
Yeah, because we can just finish talking about some of the numbers that, because I think there's a big difference between the number of loans that were approved that everybody on Twitter, the politicians are high-fiving about, versus the money that possibly only made it to people's bank accounts.
Right. And that was part of the confusion. Like the first week of the program, I spent days and days trying to figure out how much of this money had actually been dispersed versus approved versus entered, because the politicians were using dispersed in a lot of cases, and we knew for a fact that the money wasn't getting dispersed. So at this point, we know that all of it has been allocated, right? It's all been claimed, but how much has actually gotten into small business bank accounts?
So I'm tracking this on pppstats.info, and there's another website that popped up that did really a survey of people that had their E-Trans numbers. It's called covidloantracker.com. And they had 3%, then the number moved to 4%, then it was 5%. And so 5% is the best we've seen so far. And so that's only $17 billion.
That's 5% of the people who attempted to apply.
5% of the people that got an E-Trans number.
Oh, okay. So,
because their survey that they had, you couldn't fill out. Like, it had a question in the survey, and you couldn't continue on without an E-Trans number to some extent. So their survey only has people that got a response back.
And I'm curious about that, because that's like a data point, one point in time, and maybe I'm annoyed that I haven't got my money yet. I go to this site, I fill out the survey, and it's basically prejudice toward people who haven't gotten the money yet. Because if you got the money, you're happy. Why are you going online looking for this thing, right? So
that's true.
I would take that with a grain of salt. 5% seems like really low to me. There are two other data points that I saw. And one is data from Chase. So on Tuesday, I think it was Tuesday or Wednesday, Marco Rubio tweeted out that Chase had said that they had distributed, let me see where that is. I lost it, so I don't want to quote the wrong number, so I'm going to find it. Okay. Give me a minute.
So while you're searching for that, Blake, I've been tweeting on top of Marco Rubio all week. I actually asked him to come on the podcast, but to no avail. He did not respond to those tweets. And then I also had another run-in with a politician. So AOC, the representative from New York City, she had a webinar on PPP and the emergency loan. And I attended her webinar, and I was the only person whose questions did not get asked during her webinar.
Did not get answered?
Did not get answered, yes.
Yeah.
So the politicians...
nobody likes the media, David.
Nobody likes the media. I do have to commend, though, Marco Rubio for all the politicians that are out there. Like, he's actually somewhat trying to communicate a little bit of what's going on and acknowledging the trouble with the program.
Right. Okay, so I have that number.
Okay.
So he said on the 14th that Chase had processed 300,000 PPP loans for $36 billion and had dispersed $9.3 billion. So if you do the math on that, $9.3 billion divided by $36 billion, and that is 26%. So that would have been on Wednesday. And then my other data point is this little survey that you did on Twitter, David, where you asked accountants, hey, how many loans have you applied for? How many have gotten an E-Trans number? And how many have gotten funded? And so you put that all in a spreadsheet. We got quite a few responses to that, right?
Yeah. And what drove that is, obviously we're talking to accountants and bookkeepers, and this is what drove our initial skepticism about the numbers coming out on day one, is that we couldn't reconcile them with what we were hearing from accountants and bookkeepers.
Oh, yeah. And this is the crazy thing. It took us almost 2 weeks to figure this out. And it was thanks to Marco Rubio. The SBA does not have a way in their system to track what loans have actually been dispersed. There's no official government mechanism to see, here's the total amount that has made it into small business bank accounts. There's no way to measure the success.
And they aren't requiring lenders to report it back up either.
So they don't require lenders to report it back. So the only thing we can do is extrapolate and say, okay, the lenders, once the loan is approved, have 10 days to disperse the funds. So worst case scenario, right? We know this didn't happen, but worst case is that as of yesterday, all the money has 10 days more to get dispersed. And I'm going to guess that is, I don't know if that's business days or calendar days or what, but just put this in perspective. This program is 3 weeks old. So 3 weeks ago, the CARES Act passed and this program was in there, and it's taken 3 weeks to get to this point. And we know from our survey that we did of accountants that, let's pull up this spreadsheet here that you made. You want to do the numbers?
Yeah, so we had about 33 people respond on Twitter, so it's not like some super official thing, but I left it open to accountants and bookkeepers just to say, like, hey, how many clients have you had that applied for loans? How many got E-Trans numbers? And how many had cash actually hit their bank account? And it's a response. So it's 703 applied, 187 got e-trans, and 68 had cash at their bank account.
So that's 703 loans total across 33 accountants / bookkeepers applying, helping their clients apply. So 187 of those got e-trans numbers. That's 27% of the applications got approved. And then of the applications that got approved, 68 got money in the bank. And this is basically as of Thursday. Maybe some came in today. And so 68% or 68 of 187 is 36%. So I don't know what you were thinking might happen this week, but I think on Friday of last week, it was about 5% of the approved loans had gotten paid out. And now we're at 36%. I mean, this is taking forever.
And I think it's truly being reflected in the unemployment numbers. I mean, the whole point of the Paycheck Protection Program was to protect people's paychecks, to help small businesses to keep paying employees so they don't have to go on unemployment.
Right.
And the unemployment numbers last week were another 3 million, 3.3. This week it was 5.2. And I honestly, I think it's probably going to hit 6 next week and 6 the week after that. There's no sign. If you really think and work, you can talk about extrapolating numbers, work the other direction. So the accountants are telling us 187, right? Only 26% of people that applied even got an e-trans number. So work backwards from that, right? Yeah. That's 4.3 times. So if the reported loans is 1.6 million, at least 7 million people, small businesses applied.
Oh, and I guarantee you that it's going to be more than that, right? Because there's tons of folks who didn't use an accountant to apply, right? They're not represented in this. And I think accountants, given their relationships with banks, a lot of accountants have relationships with lenders. And one of the things they do is help people get loans. So that 26, 27% success rate is probably really high compared to most businesses that don't have an advisor. So I wouldn't be surprised if it was, well, we can just look at the total number of small businesses. Oh, and one thing I want to add before we go into that is the reason this program is not working, if you ask me, is here we are with 33% of or about a little more than a third of the $350 billion has been paid out. And we are 3 weeks after the CARES Act was passed, which was at the very end of March. And not the very end, but last week of March, right? And this whole coronavirus thing that shut down the economy started in mid-March. So we're a full month from when small businesses started feeling the impact, at most of them. And most small businesses don't have more than 2 weeks of cash on hand. And I guarantee you that almost all of them have less than 30 days, to your point.
Yeah, I think I tweeted that weeks ago. I think the average small business has about 27 days of cash, and restaurants have 14.
Right.
And so, yes, they are now out of cash. And any of them that were holding on to some hope, hey, because this loan was made out it's just forgivable money. You're just going to get it. And even the emergency loan, the rules changed on that. Mm-hmm. After people apply,
we're not even talking about
money's not getting it out there. I know.
We're not even talking about the EIDL. Apparently nobody has seen money from that. People have seen the upfront, up to 10,000 advance part, but the actual loan, we don't have no clue what is going on with that. It's been eclipsed by the PPP, and people have lost hope. So where I wanted to go with this was now to think about, okay, the money has been used, $350 billion. So how much more money do we need to actually make a dent? Part of me thinks that it's too late anyway, because the businesses that are most impacted have already furloughed or laid off their workers. I mean, obviously hospitality, restaurants, what are they going to do? Hire people back and put them back on payroll? I saw people suggesting that that was the best course of action on Twitter. And I'm thinking to myself, if I'm an employer, that makes no sense, because I don't want to take my employees off of the unemployment so then they get, I put them back on payroll, I pay them for 8 weeks, and then they have to go back in line for unemployment. It doesn't really make sense.
And I mean, that's half the point of this too, was hey, keep your employees on your payroll so that when everything gets opened back up in the economy, you don't have to do this game of trying to rehire your talent. But
right.
It's just not happening. And then I've heard, so you understand about the unemployment, everybody's getting an extra $600 a week, right?
Right. So a lot of people are making potentially more money on unemployment than they were as employees.
I think in the state of Arizona, average unemployment's $240 a week.
Mm-hmm.
So now you add on $600 a week. It's significant. Right. And so now what's happening is there's some employers that are paying employees minimum wage, and those employees are screw it. I'll just stay on unemployment. I can stay on this till July 31st, and I'm getting easily $2,400 a month.
Yep.
And it's so some good thing over here that's somewhat successful, even though I think there's problems and not enough people can even get through to apply for unemployment. So over here, like, people are getting the money, and that's possibly causing more pain for a small business owner over here than when that maybe did get their PPP loan. They can't hire their employees back.
Right. So I have a interview I want to play for you that is a business owner talking about why he is going to not use the PPP money to pay his employees. This is really interesting. And when I shared this out on Twitter, it ignited a firestorm. Some people were furious that this guy would think this way. Some people said it made sense, and they're advising their clients to potentially do the same thing. So do you mind taking a quick listen to this?
Perfect, because I have yet to hear it. I did not see this tweet. So this is perfect. Get my raw reaction.
Restaurants don't typically have a ton of working capital sitting around. They're month-to-month businesses. So this capital is going to carry us through our grand reopening, for lack of a better term. And if we want to do this smartly, we have to wait till people are comfortable from this medical crisis to sit shoulder to shoulder in our restaurants or in Broadway theaters or movie theaters. And until that time, it would be, in my opinion, wasted money to start spending it. We have to wait till we have a very clear pathway to success.
So let me understand this. The money that you received from the taxpayers or backed by the taxpayers is not reaching the workers.
Not yet. It will reach the workers right now by law, Tyler, we can't open today. I wish we could. And if we did open today and only did 70% of our revenue or 60% or 50%, that money would basically evaporate in a matter of 2.5 months, because that's the calculation for the PPP loan. It's 2.5 times your monthly payroll. So if we start to use it too soon, sorry, Tyler, but the purpose of the loan is to get small business back on their feet, not for 2 months, but for the rest of our 70 years. So that's what we're hoping to accomplish here.
That was Alan Rosen, the owner of Junior's Cheesecake, which is a famous New York restaurant. 600 employees. He could use the money to bring back his employees off unemployment, pay them for 8 weeks. He's not going to do that. He's going to hold on to it.
So yeah, I want to understand his timeline. So he applied, basically got approved, and got cash in his bank 5 days later for money he may not even use for 12 weeks from now.
Yeah, he has 6 months before he even has to start making payments on it. So he's going to hold that capital for his grand reopening, which makes sense, right? But that's not what the program was intended to do. It's called the Paycheck Protection Program.
Well, and this is why I saw Marco Rubio talking about how the hotel industry doesn't get it. Like, the hotels have gotten rid of 100% of their staffs. You don't get this money because you have no employees to pay. That's the whole point of this.
But the way the program is structured, you can apply for it, you can hold on to the cash, and you don't get forgiveness if you do that. But a lot of business owners are saying, well, I'd rather have a 1% loan so that I have something that I can use to restart my business when all this goes again. And they could have designed the program so that you couldn't do this, but they didn't. Maybe this was an unintended consequence. But I think a lot of businesses are going to do this. So the money we barely have information on how much of this is actually getting into small business bank accounts. We have even less information on how much is actually getting into employee paychecks. I feel like every layer that we go through is reducing the amount that actually gets to the employees. There's the banks. Well, first there's the SBA, there's the banks, and there's the SMBs, and then there's finally the paychecks. So I don't know. We'll see. I mean, maybe this will help, this business owner survive and the restaurant can open up again, but I don't think that was what this was supposed to do. That wasn't the intent. Yeah, that is one example. I have some more numbers just to put everything in context.
I noticed
about how many businesses are getting these loans.
I'm wondering if this is an indication of how many people may or may not have them. So we've talked about some of these apps. There's an article about how finance apps, their usage is spiking because of the pandemic. And so we talked about these apps in the past, apps like Earnin, these apps where you can basically get your paycheck 2 days early. Mm-hmm. And you basically leave a tip. Well, these apps, people using these apps, it's jumped now 35%. So I think people are using it to get what possibly could be their last paycheck before the paycheck ever actually gets deposited in their bank to get some money early. Because they have no confidence they're ever going to see a paycheck again. So they're using these apps to try to get a paycheck.
Right. It's basically a free one, right?
A free paycheck. Yeah. They're using these tech companies to get that. So 1.6 million loans have been approved. That was the number you had, right? Same. That's the number I got. That's the final number from the slide deck. Yep.
Okay. So 1.6 million loans. How many small businesses are there in this country? Do you know off the top of your head?
And I've seen there's 25, people said there's 30 million businesses, and I'd say probably you take it down to 25 million small businesses. So
actually it's 30 million small businesses. That 30 million number, that is all small businesses.
All small business. Okay.
Yeah. Which is like 99% of the businesses in the country are small ones. So, there's just like a few thousand giant corporations. So those businesses employ, about half the people in this country, a little less than half. And so 1.6 million out of 30 million is 5%. So 5% of small businesses got approved for loans. And fewer than that, of course, a fraction of that actually got the money so far. But let's assume that the rest of the money comes next week. So we have funded 5% of the small businesses in this country to some extent, for the next 8 weeks for their payroll. Some data came out of the SBA on average loan size and the different tiers, how many loans there were in different loan size buckets. So the average loan was, and I'm not necessarily looking at the latest data because this is a report that came out through April 13th.
I got the slide deck here, so I could repeat the numbers if you're interested. If you talk about the bucket, I can give you the number.
Okay. So there were 1.6 million loans total. What was the average amount of the loan?
The overall average size was $206,000.
$206,000. Okay. So do you know what annual payroll that converts to?
Yeah, I have that. It's 1.3 million about.
Okay, so 1.3 million is the annual payroll. So that would be, let's say, your employees on average make about $50,000 a year, because that's the average annual salary in this country is about a little less than 50. So that means that these companies have 26 employees. Now, that's the average. The average small business, right, has a lot fewer employees. 80% of small businesses have 10 employees or less, and 90% of small businesses have fewer than 20 employees. So this average loan size is for a business with more than 20 employees. So like 10% of businesses. So what I'm kind of seeing in these numbers is that the businesses that got these loans tend to be on the larger side of the small business spectrum, which kind of makes sense. Right?
We saw that within hours, because I think when we started looking at these numbers way back on that day on April 3rd, the average loan size then was $373,000. So that right. it has come down over time, right? But yep. So the latest numbers from the SBA, so loans that are under $150,000, they gave out 1.2 million of those. But of the total bucket of money, that's only 17% of the bucket.
How much of the bucket?
17% of the bucket went to 1.2 million small businesses.
Right. The ones that are basically fewer than 10 employees. So
yeah, like 150K. Yeah, most size.
Right. So
this episode of the Cloud Accounting Podcast is sponsored by SmartBooks Genie. SmartBooks Genie was born out of the struggles experienced by Calvin Wilder as he grew his firm SmartBooks from 0 to 40 people in 8 years. Calvin has been using Genie to run SmartBooks for the last 18 months, and now he's making Genie available to all accounting and bookkeeping firms to power their client accounting services. SmartBooks Genie layers on top of QuickBooks Online to allow you to centralize your firm's workflows, manage the monthly close, automatically prepare client reports, and complete time-consuming manual processes that you're currently doing in spreadsheets or other isolated systems. By centralizing client management to get core work done accurately and on time, SmartBooks Genie will stay on top of the deadlines and scope of service that you are delivering to clients so you keep your client engagements profitable. To learn more about SmartBooks Genie and take advantage of its early adopter program offering 50% off monthly subscription fees, head over to cloudaccountingpodcast.promo/genie. That is cloudaccountingpodcast.promo/GENIE. SmartBooks Genie grants your wish for a streamlined practice.
Here you have less than 20% of the money going to 80% of the businesses. And the top 20% of the businesses collected 80% of the money. It's flipped. And this makes sense because the corporations got a week head start. They got to apply 2 weeks ago, right, on April 3rd. And they made all the sole proprietors, anyone without a corporate entity, had to wait until last Friday. By that time, most of the money was already spoken for.
Well, yeah.
So the way that this program was set up, it was, designed to give preference to large or small businesses.
Well, I agree. As far as the way it was designed, it was already set up to where sole proprietors and subcontractor level people couldn't even apply for a week. They already they were a week behind just even starting. But with the not part of the design that happened, and there's stories from accountants about their own clients who are like, yeah, I have 2 clients that got their loan approved in 5 days. Well, then you find out, oh yeah, it's because it was $800,000. The bigger loans all got pushed through faster by the banks because the banks wanted to deal with the financial risk is different for the bank, and they pushed the bigger loans through.
It's easier, right? You've already got all their information. You know who they are. So not only is it less risky, but there's less paperwork to do. And this is something that the designers of this program totally were okay with, is that banks got to choose who they gave the loans to first. And of course, the banks are going to choose their best customers. And you also have data that shows that if you were with a community bank and you had a personal banking relationship, then you were much, much, much more likely to get a loan.
Yeah, so they definitely have a lot of data on that. The COVID loan tracker has data that shows that. Even the PPP has said the amount of community banks and lenders that did that loan out. I think Marco Rubio just tweeted this out. So,
well, he argued with it.
Yeah, so he said 5,000 lenders, 5,000 different lenders, and none of them loan more than 5% of the total, and 60% of the lenders are under $10 billion in assets. So in general, it's a lot smaller banks were doing a lot of these loans, right?
Yeah, and I said earlier how I don't think the COVID loan tracker data in a lot of cases is valid because it's not a statistically representative survey, since the people coming are probably going to be the people who didn't get money. But they do have a stat on here that I think is legit, and it's of the people who did receive money. It asked them, did you have a pre-existing lending relationship? And over 80% of people who got PPP money had a pre-existing lending relationship. If you did not have a relationship with a bank already, you had a less than 20% chance of getting a PPP loan.
Yeah.
So
and I think
that definitely gives an advantage to a successful, established small business that's big enough where they get to have that personal banking relationship.
And I think that comes out in the state data. I know that a couple of people have tweeted and sent me that Bloomberg has some maps where they've mapped out each state and the percentages of loans that they had approved in those states. And some people are even loosely implying that, oh, look, it's the Trump states. But I don't think that. I honestly truly believe, based on my experience in the Midwest, this has nothing to do with these being Trump states. What it is in these states, they have much smaller banks. You have farmers. Everybody knows each other. A lot of the businesses have already had established loans with these smaller banks. It's all these mid-regional banks,
right?
And so they were just able to handle the volume of what they had to handle was much lower, and they had relationships with these people, and they were able to process these loans much more efficiently than California, which only had 24%, because in general, it's all people were going to the Wells Fargos, the Bank of Americas, the Chases, the big banks probably, and the relationships weren't there.
Well, and if you had a personal banking relationship, like let's say you're a high net worth individual or you're an important person, like Larry Kudlow's wife, the Donald Trump's senior economic advisor, Larry Kudlow, talked to Bloomberg about how his wife, who's a self-employed painter, was able to walk over to their local bank at their house in Connecticut and fill out a one-page form and get the loan. And it was super easy, he said. And to him, that represents the experience of everyone. And that's because for one thing, she's the wife of a high-ranking White House official. And two, they're wealthy, right? They have 3 homes. They are millionaires. And so they have a personal banker who's going to guide them through this thing and make sure that they get taken care of. If you're just some random business customer at Bank of America or Wells Fargo or Chase, you're screwed. I think virtually none of the people who got, it's not true. I don't know if that's a very small percentage of people who got PPP loans bank at the big banks, right? Like, it seems like it to me. I don't have exact data on that, but
I fall into the group of people that applied, got nothing. So the very first day I bank with BBVA,
mm-hmm.
They sent me an email. I think we talked about this last week loosely. They sent me an email. The very first day, I was like, "Hey, all right, it's gonna be ready tomorrow." Then I went to go to it. I got the button. I filled out my email address. I got the email the next day. I clicked the button. It took me to a page. Said start your application. Then it had a 404 error and just died out. So that day, I went and looked, for sites, and everybody's pages were down. This was that Saturday morning, right? And then I found a lender, a small local lender here in Tucson, to apply. So I applied. I never got a confirmation. I never got an E-Trans number. I got nothing. And so I stalked them on Facebook. And so this is my loan experience. I will read you the reply.
Hey, at least you got a reply. I think there's a lot of people who never even heard back.
Well, I had to stalk them I had to go to LinkedIn. There was no other way. I just had to, I bypassed the front doors to some extent.
Got it.
Essentially, I said, do I have an E-Trans number yet? How come you haven't sent just one email communication about the status?
Yeah.
And I was told, not yet. We are waiting for more funds to hit our account to process more applications. We are a very small company with a lending staff of 5 people trying to manage well over 200 applications. This type of mass lending is not what our company is built for, but we are doing our best to help customers who couldn't get their banks to fund the PP loan for them. And then I said, where are you getting the funds from? Because my understanding is the SBA is not distributing the funds to lenders until the PP loan amount has been, quote unquote, forgiven. And he said, that is correct. It's our own funds, but they're also a nonprofit. So they have to work with the city and county and other municipal organizations to get the funds. So,
right. They can only lend out a certain multiple of capital, right? So they've got to have capital requirements. So they actually have to get money so they can loan it out.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, here's a big problem with this whole thing. Everybody is trying to get the money. It's a $350 billion pot of money, which seems like a lot until you realize there's 30 million small businesses and everybody wants a chunk of it. And as Sabrina Parsons said on one of our episodes a couple weeks ago, when we were talking about this, if every small business in the country applied, everybody gets, $12,000. So, big pot of money, way more businesses, and really anyone can apply for this, which kind of seems crazy to me that there wouldn't be an effort to make this maybe more targeted toward businesses that are actually hurt by COVID-19. I mean, you can make the argument that every business is hurt, but the way this program is set up, you can get this money, even if your business is doing well. And I'll tell you why. Okay, so here I'm looking at the Treasury regulations, and here's what you have to certify to apply for this money. As part of your application, you need to certify in good faith that current economic uncertainty makes the loan necessary to support your ongoing operations, and that the funds will be used to retain workers and maintain payroll or to make mortgage, lease, and utility payments. Well, everybody has either payroll or rent / mortgage / utilities. So that's everybody in the country. And then current economic uncertainty makes the loan necessary to support your ongoing operations. I mean, every business in the country is going through economic uncertainty, right? I mean, uncertainty doesn't necessarily even mean something bad. So everybody is allowed to get this money. I can't believe they didn't make it a little more targeted.
I would say argue the same thing is on the other side on the CARES Act for unemployment. There's 12 reasons, and all it takes is somebody in your house had to stay home because the kids had to stay home. You're basically, if your kid is out of school, you can apply for unemployment.
Mm-hmm.
It's that broad. So these programs have been made very broad, but the execution and the funding, and even if you really look at the loan deck or the SBA deck about the loan, they don't say who these lenders are, but they have 15 lenders listed by numbers, right? And 14 of them are all 200,000, 500,000, 400,000 Only one lender did 40,000 loans over an average loan amount for 72,000. Everybody else focused on big businesses, big loans.
And I bet you that among even the small loan amounts, there's a lot of high net worth individuals who have S corporations, who are self-employed but make a lot of money, who went and got these loans. Because why wouldn't you? It's free money. You can use it to pay yourself, or you can use it to pay your rent. And there's no need-based methodology of assigning who gets these loans. And it's first come, first serve. And the people with the connections get it first. This really infuriates me. Billions of dollars are going to people who don't necessarily need it. And a lot of people who really, really need the money are left out in the cold. And now we're being asked to spend another $250 billion to do what? And so I looked at the numbers. What will another $250 billion that you and I are going to have to pay back someday, David? What is that going to get us? Well, based on the data from the 13th, where we're at about $250 billion in funding. So $250 billion, if everything stays the same, right, the same mix of people apply, then that'll get us another 1 million loans. So we're going to go from 1.6 million to 2.6 million, which is still less than 10% of all the small businesses in this country. And a lot of those businesses in that 10% are not the 10% that are super impacted by this crisis. It's just people who wanted free money. I'm curious if there's ever going to be any fallout from this. Like, do we ever get to know who got this money? I was seeing stories on Bloomberg about, there's hedge funds that have applied for this money. People who make millions, tens of millions of dollars a year and have billions of assets, are applying for this money.
I think it's going to take a decade for people to process what's going on, not just with the PPP, but even the data, about people getting COVID. And now have you seen some of the problems the stimulus payments are having?
Oh God. Yes. So the IRS came out with that tool to track your stimulus payment.
Yes.
I don't think I qualify, but for, just for kicks, I went to see if I'd get the note that I don't qualify. And of course I got an error message that my social security number and, the stuff that I know is absolutely correct doesn't match anything in their system. So apparently a lot of people had that same experience, right?
And then not only does the site have some issues, there's glitches, but there are actually some reporting coming out now that if you used H&R Block or TurboTax, so even though when I file on TurboTax and I have to pay, so I put my bank account number in so they can ACH that or get my refund. Apparently that if it's in TurboTax, the IRS is not storing that. So
right, and this is because of people who had their TurboTax acted as an intermediary, right? So that's why the IRS doesn't have their checking info.
Yeah. So if you're one of the people that have used TurboTax, you probably don't have the deposit yet.
And then, as we talked about before, it might take until August before people get their checks.
The paper checks.
Because the IRS can only print, they can only print 5 million a week.
And then, for all the bad service that the banks were giving, by the time the tech companies got involved, the PayPals, the Cabbages, Intuit became a PPP lender.
Oh yeah,
it was done. They basically were attempted to process loans for a day and a half, and it was done. Everything was done. Yeah. So
I feel bad for all the developers that spent all that time trying to get this thing up and running, and then the funds are out.
And if I had to guess, when they do put through any more money, it's going to be different rules. There's just no way there's no way it just gets funded exactly the same. It's going to be different rules.
Well, I would hope so. I would hope that Congress would realize that, the 24 million small businesses that don't have any employees, where it's really just a sole proprietor, they had almost no shot at getting this money. And what about them? They don't qualify. I don't know if they qualify for unemployment in every state. It's harder to get unemployment when you're self-employed, I know.
One thing that started to get me a little concerned and thinking kind of going forward, right, is the verbiage that was used in tweets and all these celebratory PPP was a win April 3rd was used. The word forgivable was just used, forgivable loans. And now you're starting to see more and more and more the words potentially forgivable loans being used in the media. And it's really kind of scary because it's starting to make me wonder, okay, are they going to change the rules just like they changed the rules on the emergency from $10K to $1K per employee? Are they going to change the rules of what people have to do to qualify to get this forgiven. And then the scary thing is, okay, now 8 weeks from now, when you use this money and you have to justify it, you have to go back to your bank, like, who's going to be processing these audits? Like, who's going to be signing off that this money was used in the proper way to get it forgiven? Like, are we setting ourselves up for another nightmare of insanity, like 6 weeks from now? If the SBA was handling just the processing of the loans, and that was a one-page loan, basically, and now you're going to get who knows how many reports to audit people?
Yeah, the SBA application was like, I don't know what, like less than 10 pieces of information, I feel like. And so now you've got to prove that you deserve loan forgiveness. How long is that going to take the SBA to process? So yeah, it'd probably be a mess, right? Where small business owner comes back with the paperwork and, well, first of all, it's a mess for the accountants who then have to like prep all this stuff for their clients. So now I got to prove that I get forgiveness. I got to fill out another form, attach a bunch of paperwork, send it to the bank. Bank has to process, all the banks have to process 1.6 million of these applications for loan forgiveness. They got to send it to the SBA, who's then got to process it and send back the forgiveness. We thought this was a mess.
And then kind of thinking about, so we got the tax deadline extended, right? So accountants, bookkeepers have some elbow room. But then basically that time got filled up with PPP loans.
Right.
And so now it's out of money. So it's funny, like April 17th, accountants today are taking a breath. I've noticed online, people are taking a breath because they can't do anything for their clients right now today, right? But if you start counting out 8 weeks from now, guess what else is going on 8 weeks from now?
The tax deadline.
The new deadline of July 15th. It's not exactly it, but it's 4 weeks within it. So basically when this money hits and people are going to have to start filling out their forgiveness paperwork and their forgiveness reports, we are going to be the heat of tax deadline season.
Well, and making it worse, a bunch of firms are laying people off. I don't know if you've been following this, but the last time we talked about it, we skipped a week talking about this because we did the interview with the AICPA folks. Not a lot of firms had laid people off, but now I'm seeing a bunch of them. Armanino, my old firm, laid off 8% of their workforce. Baker Tilly did layoffs. Burden did layoffs. We had Citron Cooperman, 5 to 10% of their workforce was laid off. Crow did layoffs. A lot of these, mid-sized firms.
They probably didn't get their PPP loan, so they can't do that.
Well, yeah, they probably don't qualify, right? Well, and there's a whole new loan thing for us to talk about, David, which is the we don't get a break either. We get the Main Street Lending Program, which is the one for businesses with, I think, more than 500 employees, like the mid-sized or the larger business. So that's all like getting going now.
Yeah. So speaking of layoffs, I do not want to forget to mention this. So I talked 2 weeks ago about Lime, and I said the scooter company Lime had their layoffs. I screwed up and I got it confused. It was actually the other scooter company called Bird. Oh, and so the story was correct. They laid off 400 people, all really in a bad way through a Zoom, but it was not. So I'll get the correct article in. I just these companies start to sound the same after a while, so I do apologize. So like a correction on that.
Well, they are copycats of each other. I think you deserve. I just think you deserve a little forgiveness.
And then to swing back, to kind of off of you and the firms laying people off, I was listening to the Big Four podcast, the Big Four Firms podcast, I think it's called. And he had tips on how you can recognize you're going to get laid off. And one of the things that was in there, I just was like, I've still been thinking about it like 2 days later. Like, if your billable hours go down, you're probably a target to be laid off. You'd agree? Yeah. So what they do is they have the HR department come meet with you a lot, so you have even less billable hours. the HR department will schedule meetings with you. How's it going, Blake?
Right.
And then you're losing billable hours, so you're even higher odds. They almost it's an extra. So if you start getting emails or meeting requests from HR people, you're probably going to get laid off because they're going to eat up your billable time.
Oh man.
So it's we're in there. But I do have a non-COVID, a non-PPP, a non-government stimulus story. If you haven't jumped into something other than that this week.
Let's just do that because
I've been holding this for 2 weeks.
Okay, yeah. Let's talk about that because all I had this week that I really wanted to talk about was coronavirus related stuff. So let's hear something else.
So this is in the Plaid blog. So Microsoft announces Microsoft Money is now going to live in Microsoft Excel, but it's powered by Plaid. So basically, to summarize this, it is bank feeds in Excel.
This is super cool.
And for those lovers of Google Sheets, I actually just coincidentally the same week got a Facebook ad for an app called Tiller Money, and it's Google Sheets, bank feeds for Google Sheets, essentially.
How do you spell that?
Tiller. It's TILLERHQ.com.
TILLERHQ.com. So I can have bank feeds go into my
basically
Google Sheets.
They're a personal finance app of some type, but once that data is in your Google Sheet, like you can do whatever you want, right? And this makes me rewind. Do you remember the Bot Keeper demo way back in the day?
Yeah.
Right? And a lot of their Bot Keepers thing was like, no, the bank feeds suck in QuickBooks and Xero, right? We get the bank feeds and we do whatever we want to them, and then we move that data to QuickBooks and Xero, right? And I'm thinking, wow, now that you can drop bank feeds and shove data from the bank feed into Excel, bank feed into Google Sheets, now you can connect the Google Sheet through Zapier to QuickBooks and Xero. You could do some really interesting stuff as an accountant and bookkeeper for your clients.
Yeah, this is really cool.
That's it. I'm almost speechless about it because it's so exciting of where the imagination can go.
Yeah, this Tiller Money thing looks super cool. I'm a big Google Sheets fan, and it's $59 a year. So I think I might just sign up to try it if I can find some time in my schedule.
Yeah, because you could create,
well, thanks for sharing that.
All those macros you can make. Think about all the macros you could do in Excel.
Yeah.
And then get the data just like you want it, and then boom, it shoves it off to the accounting system. The possibilities here are very, very interesting on where that heads.
So there's only really one other thing I want to talk about, and it is like related to the whole current economic situation we're in. It's a little broader than just, the PPP stuff.
Yeah.
And I just got to get it off my chest because I try to talk to my family about this, and they're like, they don't want to think about it. Right. So you're my outlet, David, you and our listeners. So like my big worry right now, big picture, is we have these $1,200 stimulus payments coming in for some people this week, maybe in the next few weeks in April, $1,200 per person. And then we've got, the PPP money, which, I think kind of everything we talked about makes the argument that is it really going to have that big an impact on stopping people from getting laid off and going on unemployment, all that stuff. And then we didn't even talk about this, but all the state unemployment offices are completely overwhelmed, right? I mean, people are calling nonstop all day long, every day, and they can't get through. They can't even get on unemployment. So they're not getting that money. And, we don't know how many millions of people are stuck trying to get it still.
Yeah. And we haven't even been able to look at that data, right? But I'm sure just like people they've applied for loans, they've heard nothing. There's people probably in queues just waiting for a response from a state unemployment office.
So my worry is that, we're going to get to May 1st and just a ton of people and businesses are not going to make their rent or mortgage payments. And then what happens to the economy if all of a sudden renters aren't paying rent and people aren't paying their mortgages? Do we get into another housing crisis at that point? Do we somehow do like rent forgiveness? That can't really happen on a national level. I can't see that happening. Like what happens?
There's a Planet Money or Odd Lots podcast or Planet Money Indicator, one of those three podcasts, and I'll have to find it and track this down. They totally address this and how it works its way all the way up and who winds up eating it.
So yeah, who does? Like if we did like mortgage forgiveness or rent forgiveness, like at a large scale, like it's the investors, right? In the end, it's like all of our pension funds and 401ks, right?
Or foreign countries.
Well,
and that's why everybody might be okay with it. Yeah, it's very, very interesting. So I'll find that podcast and get that in the show notes. I think that answers a lot.
That would be great. But the problem is like Congress is still on break and they're not coming back anytime soon. So like this isn't going to get solved by May. So I feel like in May we're going to be talking a lot about that because some scary numbers will come out. I
mean, I don't want to end on a downer either, but they've talked about like for the COVID deaths and like, hey, those 3 weeks in April are going to be really bad. I feel like the small business numbers and the economy numbers, the next 4 weeks are going to be really bad.
Yeah, they lag.
Like we have not seen bad numbers yet.
Right.
We have not even seen them yet.
Yeah, that makes sense, right? Because they lag
scary
behind all the leading indicators of deaths, COVID deaths. And I just want to like leave with one calculation. Like, what if we spent our money maybe a little more wisely? Because I don't think this PPP program is is all that great. Listeners, you tell me, but these numbers don't sound good. And so like, what else could we have done with the $2 trillion? So let me just do a little math for you, David, right now, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
So let's say there's what, like 330 million people in this country. I could be off by a 10 or something million, but it's about that much, right? 330 million. Let's say that 100 million of them are really impacted by this, which, that would kind of make sense. That'd be like 30%, or between 20 and 30% losing their jobs, right? Not being able to work, all that stuff, right? Which that would be Great Depression level kind of unemployment, which is what could really happen here, right? So let's say it's 100 million. So if we wanted to cover them for the duration of this crisis, what if we just gave each of those 100 million people $2,000 a month? So that's, 100 million times 2,000 is 200 billion, right? So $200 billion a month to give all those people enough to get by. So basically, for the cost of the $2 trillion program, the CARES Act, we could give all those people $2,000 a month for 10 months. Wouldn't that? And
I think I've seen some of this. Like, that's a proposal that Democrats might be running up the flag right now. Is they want to just give everybody $2,000 a month.
I mean, it just kind of seems, I'm a Republican, I'm not a Democrat, but like that policy, that idea, which I think is going to go nowhere, it just makes a lot more sense to me than convoluted loans and bailouts, and just like give the money to the people who really need it to pay their rent and buy food. Kind of makes sense to me. I mean, even if you didn't spend the whole $2 trillion, what if you just spent half of it? That would get you for, 5 months.
Well, that's what they thought they were doing, right? Like, hey, it's $600 extra a week for people on unemployment. We're doing the paycheck protection, so people keep getting that. But it's not, the problem is it's just not making it to the people fast enough. And it's like, how, like you might, but if you came out and said, hey, here's the deal, everybody for 6 months or the rest of 2020, you're going to get $2,000 a month showing up every month. That would just put everybody at ease, right? Just the knowing about it would put everybody at ease. And the problem is right now, it's like, hey, here's a bucket of $350 billion. Elbows and assholes trying to get it. Like it's just fight over it. Like we're off a feed truck here. It's crazy. And you're right. Like some way to smooth this out and give people a peace of mind when right now we don't even know when peace of mind when we get to go back to work is, right?
And I don't know, like if there's a better way to distribute that money. I don't think the banks were a good idea for doing it. Maybe there's, a better way to get it out to people if we did something like that. I do think that like some of the tech companies would be able to do it a lot better.
Amazon. You go to Amazon. It's just in your account. It just shows up.
It just shows up as your Amazon gift card. That would be funny. Yeah.
You specify your apps. Like, I would like to have some of it go to my Starbucks account, some of it go to my Amazon account, some of it go to my PayPal account, and then they just push it down through that way. But I even think all of that's pushed eventually on the back end through the banks and rails that the banks own. So,
well,
who knows how we'll get there.
That's it from me this week, David. I think I sound like a socialist, but I swear I'm not.
I think everybody has to take a good weekend off. I mean, all our listeners, like, it's funny. I can see it in our show download numbers. You can see where people, those 3 weeks before the tax deadline was extended, our show numbers started to go down. Then they extended the tax deadline and all our downloads went up for that week because accountants and bookkeepers had breath, right? They could take a breather. And then PPP dropped and our download numbers were reflected in that. And so my bet is like, we're going to have a lot of listeners this weekend because accountants and bookkeepers have a little breathing room until God knows what next legislation comes down the pipe.
Maybe something new will crop up. Until next week, David, where can people find you online?
You can track me down on Twitter and LinkedIn. I'm at David Leary. And one other reminder, Podchaser.com is doing a donation to Meals on Wheels to help, feed elderly that right now are stuck at their houses. They can't go to grocery stores, right? And if you write a review of the Cloud Accounting podcast and if Blake and I reply to the review, they donate money 2x more if we reply to your review. So if you want to help out a little bit, leave a review on Podchaser.
Oh yeah, and we got a voicemail, David.
Oh yeah.
So let's listen to that. Okay. Here we go.
You've got mail.
Hi, David. I am Kristen from Texas, and I just had to vent because my situation I feel like is too unbelievable. I had a great accounting job, which I left on February 28th. It felt like the right time to actually start a marketing agency for accountants. the economy was good. I was financially stable. And we really don't need to go into retrospectively why that was not the right move. But I am pretty sure I am also disqualified for unemployment and the small business loan. So I will be catching up on your podcast. Anywhere I should start? Thanks. Bye.
Well, this episode was definitely a great place to start. So thanks, Kristen, so much for listening. And yeah, David, do you have any recommendations, like favorite episodes?
I did create a list on Podchaser of our 10 best episodes of last year. So you could search for that and easily see that on Podchaser, those episodes. And the phone number that she used to call in on is 202-695-1040.
So if you want to leave us a message and we'll take a listen, maybe even play it on the air, leave a message for us. What is that again?
202-695-1040.
And you can find me on Twitter. I'm at Blake T. Oliver. I'm very active on Twitter these days. All the latest, follow me there, and you'll hear it there first, and then we can talk about it on the podcast. Anything else?
No, I think that's it, but that's a good observation. Yeah, all the PPP action is on Twitter. It's not on LinkedIn. It's amazing.
Until next week, David, have a good one. Hope you have a great weekend.
You too. Bye, everybody. Time for the classifieds. If you want to learn how to make video tutorials from an expert, sign up for Hector Garcia's live webinar, How to Make Video Tutorials, so you can learn how to create content to educate your team, your clients, and your prospects. Use coupon code CAP50 for $50 off your purchase. Head over to www.hectorgarcia.com/tutorial. Still sending spreadsheets of unclassified expenses to clients? Automate this process and get client answers instantly with Client Hub's QuickBooks Online integration. This feature was described as one that only an accountant would have come up with, as it solves a real big pain point. Client Hub is a modern client portal designed for cloud accounting firms. Get started today with a free trial at clienthub.app and enter promo code CAP25 for 25% off your first 3 months. Are you looking to get some of the best content in the world to improve your team and your firm, and some free CPA credits too? Good news, the Accounting Salon has turned into a virtual event called Salon V, and it's open to the world. You can register for free at accountingsalon.com. Want to get the word out about your newsletter, webinar, party, Facebook group, podcast, ebook, job posting, or that fancy Excel macro you just created? Why not let the listeners of the Cloud Accounting Podcast know by running a classified ad? Hit the show notes for the link to get more info, and be sure to check out our special stimulus pricing of 4 episodes for just $100.